Welcome to Newton's Macabre Tales. To find more free short stories, visit www.newtonweb.com with 2 B's. The Ghouls of Bangalore by Newton Webb. 2518, New Bangalore, the Cirrus System. The air was pregnant with the scent of spiced protein cubes and a constant drone of the ever-insufficient air filtration systems. Kleeman strode down the metal gantry, his boots crunching through the garbage strewn across the lower decks of the New Bangalore colony. He reached his quarters. A vagrant had passed out on his doorstep, blocking the entry. Kleeman could see an empty hex needle still attached to his spine. Grunting, he nudged the body into the rest of the street trash. His door hissed open. The lights flickered on in his apartment. Cartons of discarded ration packs lay stacked in the corner of the room. He searched hopefully for a bottle of spirits that hadn't previously been emptied. Finding a third of a bottle of whiskey, he slumped into his gel chair and settled down with a glass of his favourite, much-needed tipple. Thumping the wall, he caused a menu screen to illuminate. He filtered through the musical selection and found Paula's favourite composer. Tinny music blared through recessed speakers. The notes fought through the background sounds of the lower decks. Kleeman glanced over at the corner and sighed. Yeah, Paula, I'm late. And yeah, I'm drinking. He took a hefty slug of whiskey. But it's been a hell of a day. I need this to help me think. There was no response. There never was these days. It's like that, is it? Well, I guess the day can't get any worse. He swilled his whiskey around in his glass. I've been cleaning the nutrient vats on level B. The posh ones. Kleeman finished his drink, pouring another and ignoring the scorn that washed over him like a wave. I'd add a drink. I need a bit these days to keep my hands steady. But I still dropped my scraper into one of the empty vats. Stupid, I know. But it gets worse. I jumped in to get it back, and my feet slipped on the sludge at the bottom. I banged my head. Must have faded out for a bit. He turned his head and indicated a scabbed-over bruise. Stupid, Kleeman. Sometimes I think you married me as an act of charity. You're the only good thing in my long, messed-up life. He filled his glass. Yeah, I know. Better lower my voice. Look here, we'll be sleeping. I'd like to see her before I go to bed. The memory of her face is the light that I see when I scrub the vats. He closed his sallow, sunken eyes. A sudden weariness came over him. I heard something, Paula. Something bad. A team had come in to feed the vats. The best protein paste comes from feeding meat to the microorganisms in the vats. Real meat, Paula. We aren't even allowed to see it. They store it in a sealed freezer. See, I always thought it was from animals or even synthetically grown. You know, the bits they can't serve as cuts to upper management. But I think I might be wrong. I don't know. Sometimes I get confused. I see things or I hear things that others don't. The whiskey, it helps. It helps it all make sense. He gulped down another slug. The workers, they were carrying something large. It took 2 of them to load it onto a cart. It was wrapped in some kind of opaque film, but Paula, they referred to it as an expended asset. One of them tipped it from the cart into the vat and laughed. He wondered who it was. Who, Paula? Not what. He looked at the empty bottle. I can't be sure, Paula, but I think they're feeding people into the vats. I get so confused sometimes, but that is what I think. For a long time, his bleary eyes stared into space. Yeah, I know. I need to be sure. I have to know the truth. I don't know why it matters to a cleaner, but it's not right. It doesn't sit easy with me." He paused. His eyelids were heavy now. I'm gonna say goodnight to Lukja now. Yeah, I'll be quiet, don't you worry. Kleeman stumbled to the back bedrooms. He carefully opened a small room to look upon a cot, surrounded by dolls. A thick layer of dust shrouded everything in the room. He pulled the door gently shut and then collapsed onto his bed, sighing. He didn't bother with the sheets. 2 thumps from his fist shut down the music as he faded into sleep. Then, the dreams started up again. Visions of his past, torturing him. A buzzing sound cut through Kleeman's head like a knife. He thumped at the door to silence the alarm. It snoozed 3 times until he eventually lumbered, cursing, to the kitchen to shut it down. His hands were shaking and his head pounded. He fumbled around for a bottle, and not finding one, latched onto a can of stim juice. The drink finally brought his brain to a state of wakefulness, and he used that brief moment of clarity to find a new bottle of whiskey from the cupboard. For a moment, he knew despair, his memories pulling at the corners of his mind, teasing loose long-forgotten terrors. He shook his head and swigged from the bottle, burying them in a fog of alcoholic oblivion. Looking up, he was relieved to see his family at the breakfast table. They never spoke to him. Why would they? He was a mess. His stomach wasn't ready for breakfast, so he stuffed a packet of protein cubes into his pocket. His hands and breathing were stable now. He took another pull from the bottle and filled up his hip flask with enough whiskey to hopefully see him through the day. The front door hissed open. Kleeman slid down the street, barely noticing the effluence around him. Children were picking at the garbage and debris clustered around the walkways. Everything in New Bangalore was recycled hand-me-downs from the upper decks. They used machines and cleaners in the upper decks to clear the streets and reprocess the materials. The trash wasn't worth enough to justify it in the lower decks, so instead, it just clogged the colony's corridors. He was early for work. His previous life as an engineer had given him a great deal of respect for punctuality. Of course, that was when the monarchy had been in power. He never discussed politics, but he'd been a staunch monarchist. He liked to think that people were born to fill a role in life. He'd never bought into the lie that social mobility. The only direction Kleeman travelled was down. He didn't mind, although he thought Paula deserved better. As a senior engineer, he'd been able to afford to live on the higher deck in the colony. They'd been able to eat the higher quality protein cubes too back then. His thoughts darkened as he thought of the protein cubes being made in the vats. He needed to know. His suspicions gnawed at him. He swigged out of his flask and cursed. He needed to take it slow, or he would run out midway through the day. There was a limit to the size of a flask a man could conceal in his overalls. The entrance to Durkin Hydroculture loomed at the end of the corridor. The huge armoured vault door was covered in a film of grease and dirt. It was cleaned daily, but the filth from the lower decks pervaded and infected everything that it came into contact with. His boots crunched as he trod on the chitin shell of one of the insects that had come to plague the colony. Kleeman welcomed them. They were the only ones that bothered to reprocess the filth. He fumbled to find his entry pass. The vault door chimed as he swiped his card and then pressed his thumb into the DNA scanner. A series of beeps sounded, acting as a countdown, before the vault door slid open. He found himself looking into the barrels of 2 armoured prefects, with shotguns levelled at his head. He nodded dismissively. "Good morning, Isidore. Good morning, Miron." Behind him, the doors closed with a clunk. "Arms up! Prepared to be scanned!" one of the helmets replied. The integrated voice changes made it impossible to distinguish one prefect from another. He stood with his hands in the air as the walls behind him hummed. "Right you are, lads," he said. The humming stopped, and the guns were lifted. The prefects dismissed him with a nod in the direction of the exit. He strode past them with a wave, and wandered on through the corridors towards the locker room. There, he retrieved his cleaning tools and began his day's work. The first hour was always spent doing the toilets on the executive floor. They needed to be immaculate before upper management arrived at the office. The cleaners had to be gone before they started their shift. It wouldn't do for the higher echelons to soil their eyes by seeing the likes of him. Picking up his cleaner's kit, he took the opportunity to take his old engineer's toolkit and slip it into his trolley. Kleeman needed to know. He didn't know why, but he felt an invisible will pulling him to the protein vats, pulling him to the locked freezer. It was quiet now. He levered the plate of the locking mechanism from the wall and then rewired it to release the door. He saw dozens of hanging sacks, and pulling out his multi-tool, Kleeman tore one of them open. He didn't gasp. He didn't cry out. He'd known deep down what it was going to find. But he'd also known precisely what he was going to do about it. Music blasting through his cochlear implants, Trevor strode through the gleaming chrome doors. They parted before him with the merest of whispers. The receptionist smiled, their happiness never quite reaching their eyes as they waved at him. He graced them with a curt nod. Brushing an imaginary piece of lint off his suit, he entered the lift and pushed at the button for the top floor. Sneering at the control panel, he pulled out a bottle of antibacterial gel and swiftly rubbed off any germs. The lift should be voice-activated, just like his personal transport. A gentle instrumental played as the soft scent of sandalwood wafted from hidden vents. When Trevor emerged at the top floor, his new secretary, Janice, rose and bowed her head. "Get me a stim juice, Janice!" He paused, wrinkling his face with disgust. "Wait!" He stalked towards her. "Have you been crying? How dare you? I told you before, you look so ugly when you cry. Sort your face out, then get me my drink." Marching through the double doors to his office, they slid shut behind him as he mentally committed to replacing Janice with a more mentally stable subordinate. His desk loomed in front of him. It was made of genuine mahogany, a rarity of staggering expense. Reaching for a decanter of single malt whiskey, he swore. It was half empty. Someone had been stealing his imported whiskey. He spun, eyes flaring with rage. In the corner by the door sat a cleaner, a filthy, ragged cleaner, in his office. His gaze lowered to see a glass of whiskey in his hairy, unkempt hands. He shivered with rage, his anger blooming red as he pointed a finger like a weapon. "You're fired! I'll see you destroyed for this, you imbilic gibbon!" The cleaner stood and strode towards him, his eyes dead. He placed the glass on a desk with a resounding thud. "Sit down," he commanded. Trevor's mouth flapped. For the first time in a long time, he felt physically intimidated. He spun and tried to open the doors. They stubbornly refused to open. Locked. Trevor looked incredulously at the simpleton who stood watching him, eyes glowering. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded. "That's why I'm here. I have questions for you." "Questions? Who the hell do you think you are? Questions?" Racing to his desk, he hammered on the intercom. "Security! To my office! Now!" "They won't get through that door any time soon." "I said, I have questions." Trevor reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a Gauss pistol. Questions? The only question you need to ask is, why shouldn't I pull the trigger and pop your head like a ripe melon? Do you want to fucking die? What do you think of that? The oaf wasn't bright enough to be scared. That, or he was too drunk. The protein vats. I think that you're feeding them with human bodies. That's a statement, not a question, you idiotic peasant. Besides, you're a cleaner. The slop you're issued is far too low grade to be protein-enriched. Trevor chuckled. You come to my office and make demands. Ruining your life will become my personal pet project. You can't hurt me. Not really. The cleaner's dull, tiny eyes tracked him. Trevor stepped forwards and made as if to pistol whip the man. But then when the man cocked his head curiously at him, Trevor jerked back as if stung. He aimed his pistol at the cleaner's head again. So you do feed human bodies to the protein vats? Trevor sneered. The mid-tier vats, those who are valuable enough to warrant good nutrition, but not valuable enough to warrant genuine meat. It's not like you'd ever get any. I used to be a senior engineer. And then what happened? You fucked up somehow, didn't you? A malicious grin spread across Trevor's face. Looking at the man's badge number, he keyed it into his console. Kleeman, stupid name. Drunk on duty, demoted. Oh, look at this. Trevor cackled. Kleeman had taken the bottle now and collapsed back onto his chair. This is magnificent. You come in here, full of anger and righteous indignation. Your fucking wife, got cancer. At a cleaner's grade, the medication we hand out is just sugar pills. Kleeman's eyes narrowed. He remained silent, even as his face darkened. Trevor tightened his grip on his pistol. Don't you move! Kleeman remained seated, pouring himself more whiskey. Your drinking ruined your life, and didn't just kill your wife. Oh, it fed your supervisor. Oh, this is wondrous. Trevor snorted and leaned back, his hands on his hips. Look at you! So angry, and yet there is nothing that you can do. Trevor nodded, finished his glass and stood up. Sit the fuck back down! Sit down! I don't need to do anything. I've already done it. Shoot me if you like. Kleeman tossed the ammunition clip over to Trevor. Numbly, Trevor checked his pistol. It had been unloaded the whole time. What have you done? The intercom. I rewired it. Been broadcasting through the announcement speakers. Trevor turned to the windows. Already the first fires had started as riots began across the colony. What have you done? He said numbly as Kleeman returned to his seat with another glass. Ruined my life. Reckon you've done worse, though. Kleeman looked at the almost empty bottle. I wouldn't hold out for security. I reckon they've got bigger problems. Trevor didn't respond. He just watched through the window in horror. The fires were getting larger. The fires were getting closer. Thank you for listening. To get notified every time a new episode is released, please click follow or subscribe and turn on all notifications. If you enjoyed this episode, then please take a moment to rate Newton's Macabre Tales. Reviewing allows the podcast to grow.